Welcome to Mind Love Premium, episode 85. Today's episode is all about how to activate your 5 core energies.
Einstein said it beautifully once. He said, the difference between what the least knowledgeable person knows and what the most knowledgeable person knows is trivial compared to what is not known. And so I've always found these great ones, the inspired kind of creators and path makers and change makers from history, that they were less concerned about trying to compare and contrast where they were relative to where other people were. And they were more concerned merely about the unfathomable, large, universal truths and ideas and aspirations that lay seemingly beyond humanity's reach. But then you look at it 60, 70, 100 years later, it came to within humanity's reach. And that's how humanity has advanced.
It's a new day, a new episode, and a new opportunity to subscribe to the podcast. If you're listening for the first time, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you always know about new episodes. Plus, it makes you one of my favorite people. Because the more subscribers I have, the more I attract amazing guests to help better serve you. So don't forget to subscribe. Are your goals for your outer world and your inner world aligned? Do you even know? For most people, these two goals, I guess we can call them, seem to clash. Either in the pursuit for outer success, like material wealth or wanting to be liked and loved, supported and promoted, you ignore that quiet, subtle voice of your spirit. Or in the pursuit of inner peace, you end up struggling with money or you strain relationships. But what if I told you that there's a third option? You discover how to create outer impact from a place of inner mastery. You activate your inner core and express it in everything you do. And in turn, you create the conditions where inner success and outer success can thrive in perfect alignment. Before I started Mind Love, I worked at a startup in a pretty toxic environment. At the same time, I was going through yoga teacher training. I was deepening my meditation practice and reading about spirituality and mindset shifts. I'd spend all day Sunday with these high vibe people, mastering our minds and our bodies, and then go to work on Monday and feel like I was caught in a tornado of emotions, just trying to keep myself on the edge of fight or flight. I tried working remotely and starting side hustles just to create more pockets of peace and passion in my life, but the waves of stress from my job always seemed to counteract all the work I was doing. But I couldn't give up my job. I'd stop making money. I'd have to go job hunting. I couldn't give up my job for some random quest of spirituality, right? It took me 5 years to realize the real stakes were the other way around. I had been sacrificing my life, my happiness, for a replaceable job. And the older I get, the more it becomes undeniable that my greatest resource is time, especially now that I have a baby. I look back to life before when I could just choose to go away on a retreat or spend a full week working on my business completely uninterrupted. I am so thankful that I spent time to align my life beforehand. Now I'm at a point in life where my goals and my growth both follow the same trajectory. When I want to learn something new or work on something in my life, I can actually just talk to an expert for an hour and share what I've learned with all of you. I love it, and it keeps me accountable, and it makes my heart sing, and I'm proud of myself all at the same time. But what I've learned is the work is never really over. Yeah, I've built the foundation, but I have to keep nudging myself back to my center every single day. So today we're talking about how your 5 core energies hold the key to success, whether in your inner world or your outer world. How to activate your 5 core energies, and our 3 natural states of consciousness, and how to move between them. Before we go deep today, I want to give you a little gift, and I want to give it to you every single day. It's called the Morning Mind Love. I know how life can be. You're all fired up after an inspiring episode, and then a new day or a new challenge comes at you, and it's just hard to keep up that energy. Well, the Morning Mind Love is kind of like an oracle from your higher self to help you start each day with a positive focus. Plus, when you sign up, you get 2 free gifts, a 30-minute binaural meditation and 30 days of journaling prompts to help you remember who you truly are. And it's all completely free. So join over 9,000 people and go to mindlove.com to sign up or text the word morning to 33777. And now let's welcome Hitendra Wadhwa to the show.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
So what's your story and what drove you to first study and then teach the laws of success?
Well, I think, there's a hunger in all of us to want to live a fulfilling, rewarding life, to go on, if you want to call it like a hero's journey, to, pursue some form of success, right? And whatever it is, our passions are. And so I certainly, had that as well. And so, part of my life was all about some of these outer kind of accomplishments and, attainments that one was pursuing. And yet there was a hunger in me from within for something more authentic, more true to myself, more deeply connected with something, just kind of beyond just the finite moment of the here and now and the material and sensory experience of life. And so I was in some ways very blessed. I grew up in India, and it's a culture where from an early age, spirituality in some ways is infused in you. And so I was able to explore certain of those, harder questions in life more through the lens of studying, mysticism and the great scriptures and seeking to try to kind of develop a habit of meditation and things. But on the outside, I was doing all these outer hunger things. And so when I started to do this work that you're talking about, my book and the teaching that I do at Columbia and my institute, really the goal for me there was to find a way to bring these two worlds together, the inner and the outer, the pure, authentic me, and then the I want to do and be successful in the world me. And I realized more and more as I was doing that, they were actually always meant to be together. They really weren't meant to be separate. And there are actually some timeless laws that we can, all stumble into and discover and experiment with and embrace. And when we do, then we get to that place where there's a harmony, on the inside and the outside. So that was about 15 years ago where I kind of made that my quest, in my professional life to bring the inner and the outer together.
So I have kind of followed that same path of chasing the outer first and then it either feeling like the inner was lacking or doing the inner and then the outer was lacking. And you said that they're not really meant to be separate. Why do you think that for so many people that drive for the inner and outer success end up clashing?
Yeah, it's kind of the human thing to do, to really on the outside seek to conform, and even those of us who are in some ways rebelling, let's say, against the institutional, whatever it is, we tend to have a certain community of people around us who reinforce, our rebellious nature and who, in a sense, we are conforming with, that circle of friends who support us and cheer us on for whatever it is we are doing. We're seeking to get loved by them, get applauded by them, get appreciated by them. So there's this natural human hunger for connection, for achievement, for applause, all of that, right? And on the other hand, that sometimes leaves us feeling a little bit dry from within. So that's one of these kind of human struggles that we should just acknowledge is there, right? But I would also offer to you that it's not as simple merely as saying, okay, let me just throw all of those kind of considerations and compulsions away and just try to be like who I want to be from within. Because as soon as we start to look within, I would offer to you, there's a circle of friends that we have within, just like we have on the outside. And even within the circle, there's a lot of dissension and tension and pulls, in different directions. And so a part of me wants to, be disciplined, and a part of me wants to be very, just loose, casual, indulgent. A part wants to do good, and a part just wants to just consume and just focus on my own, hungers and all of that, right? And so this is therefore a journey, the harmonization of the inner and the outer, and also the actual clarity about all these different friends that I have within me, which of them is my true self and which of them are really my false selves who may gratify an impulse in the moment, but really in the medium to long run will leave me dry, will leave me feeling like, this wasn't really a year well lived. I actually offer, in the work that I do, that the first thing we have to win is not the outer battle, it's the inner battle. Once we are able to, from within, get anchored in our true self, and I call it your inner core, Once we get anchored more in our core and not these like false, pulls and, compulsions and addictions and habits and impulses, once we get really anchored in our core, then it's kind of, and this was the breakthrough for me. It's really powerful to realize that people start to sense that. People start to see that there's a certain kind of, if you want to call it like an inner charisma that is starting to exude, from us. There's a certain peaceability, a certain, a sense of fulfillment, unconditionally, a certain sense of steadiness and groundedness, and a certain capacity to be fully present in the moment and to be really deeply connected and interested in helping serve and support and, the people around us. And so they start to sense that. And therefore, good things start to happen to us from the outside, not because we're like dressing for success and learning and mastering all of these, like the outer technicalities that the world teaches us you need to be successful, but because somehow by winning some of those inner battles, we just like show up as the most compassionate version of ourselves, like a Mother Teresa, or the most calm version of ourselves, like a Gandhi. And then people around us also become calm and compassionate, and good things start to happen. Anyway, so that's the idea I'd like to propose, that, look, it's natural to feel these conflicts. It's there for all of us. You've confessed up to it. I've confessed up to it. And yet there is a path through which one can get to a place where one develops first inner harmony and then over time, even outer.
I love the way you worded that, where it's like there's a circle of friends kind of living inside of us. I'll admit that often I can find my mind sort of slipping into the idea that I want to be this version of success, but man, I just binged on social media for an hour and a half while we're paying for a sitter. Why did I do that? And then I start beating myself up and think, well, is that my true self? Is it that lazy version, that addicted version of me that's my true self? But just giving voice to the idea that, yeah, that's a part of me, but it's not the only part of me. The part of me that gets up at 5 a.m. to do writing, to get this podcast done, that's also a really big part of me. It's really weird. I think I'm emotional. I almost just cried right now. Maybe wow. I'm giving voice to this part of myself that because especially just the more I'm an entrepreneur, I work from home, I have a baby. So I see people less often than I usually do. And so I'm just realizing through this conversation that that inner circle of friends is what's there most of the time. And so, yeah, I think we often end up beating ourselves up and think, well, maybe this is really me and that's not. But the truth is we're so complex that we're multifaceted and all of those are parts of ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, one construct I like to keep, present in my mind is, there is, if you want to call it, the present me, right? And that present me has all of these different conflicting pulls at times and may invest in doing something that may be a little bit sort of in conflict with my nobler purpose or something. But then there is what you might call the ideal version of me, or the most inspired, the most pure version of me, the most egoless version of me. And I see sparks of that, from time to time. Perhaps I'm taking a walk in nature, speaking to somebody who's really very uplifting and inspiring, or reading a certain passage like that in a book, or through meditation. And that may be a glimpse of my truest self. I'm not there all the time. And I do get in the immediate moment, sometimes a lot of gratification from certain activities and habits that in the moment feel very real, very true to me. But I also realize that actually speaking, I'm a work in progress. And as Saint Augustine once said, he said, no sinner is without a future and no saint is without a past, And so when you think of it that way, there is the human version of me, which is a work in progress. And there's this, if you want to call it ideal, saint version of me that I get glimpses of from time to time. And I have patience and I have capacity for self-forgiveness. And I realize that, I slip a little bit here and there, and I'll indulge a little bit here and there. And I can't be immediately my full saintly self every moment, but it's a beautiful thing to be aware that it exists within you, this capacity to be a perfect hero, in your journey. And maybe in some ways the quest in life is to get, a little bit closer to it.
Yeah, you had this quote in your book that really hit me. And it said that The root of our problem is the mistaken idea that you're being true to yourself when you give free expression to your thoughts, feelings, values, personality, and desires. And it's interesting because I feel like that quote almost seems to contradict a lot of what the messages people are getting online about what self-care really is, like, oh, you're feeling this, just do it. Or, oh, you're thinking of this, go out and do it. and just, give in to that, just like settle down. And I do think that there's a place for that and there's a time for that, but there's this level of discernment that comes before that. Like, is this a thought that I want to expand with then action? Or is this a feeling that I want to indulge by thinking deeper into it? Is that what you meant by that? Is this a thought that I want to expand with then action? Or is this a feeling that I want to indulge by thinking deeper into it? Is that what you meant by that?
Yeah, I like that way of thinking a lot. I like that way of thinking, Melissa. I mean, see, one metric that may be worth having us keep in mind is we should certainly do things that ultimately, make us happy. But happiness is also, of different kinds, right? Like there is something that can make you happy today. So let's say, just as an example, I go out for a good, beautiful meal, an enjoyable conversation with a friend. I mean, it makes me happy to do that. But then, 2 months later, would that experience still be a source of happiness for me? Is it adding to my bucket of happiness? Not by itself. But if I've cultivated a practice of gratitude, where I can look back at fond memories in life and get a surge of joy within me for having experienced those, even though I'm not experiencing it today, but having had the opportunity and privilege to have experienced those in the past, if I have that gratitude muscle built, then that experience, which I have today, will actually yield even more growing happiness over time, right? And so we can all therefore assess experiences and by the way, and then there are some experiences which give us happiness today, but which will bring us sadness tomorrow. We all know that, things which wreck our health or which wreck our mental health or put lives at risk, for us and others could give us an immediate high in the moment. But we know, tomorrow something not very good is going to be incrementally added to our life because of the fact that we developed this habit now, or we're, kind of really punishing our body now, what have you. And so is there a certain set of practices which, when you do them in the moment, they both bring you immediate joy and they also cumulatively add to the joy you will have later in life, even when your body is failing you, even when you've retired from active public life and not many people are following you on LinkedIn or Twitter or anything anymore. Even when, you're aging and your loved ones, let's say, are starting to die, because your peer group is also aging and what have you. I like to conduct thought experiments. And that's just like a thought experiment I just want to encourage us to keep in mind, which is, are there certain practices today which will just keep adding to a bucket of happiness even in periods in the future? Maybe that can allow us to start being more forethoughtful. Now, for me, one of those practices was meditation. For the longest of time, I was not doing it. I knew that it had something in it, but I just wasn't doing it because in the immediate moment, it was not giving me pleasure. It was giving me, just a lot of struggle and mental restlessness and a feeling of failure about the fact that I didn't really feel anything. And then I just wouldn't do it, and I would do it for 2 days and not do it for 2 months and then do it for 2 days and not do it for 2 months. And that kept going on for about 20 years or so. And from my teens, it was really more in my mid-30s where I finally, told myself, no, I got to start now because I got to start building up this capital inside me of the hours and hours and days of striving and practice. And initially when I did it, I thought, you know what, this is going to be a sacrifice. It's going to involve just lots of years of just self-discipline and only in future may it bear fruit. But I was pleasantly surprised that once I started on that discipline and I started to do it every day, just like those of us who maybe haven't done it for meditation, but they've done it, let's say, for running, they're couch potatoes and then they start to run. And initially it's a torture, but you get to that point where it actually becomes a source of joy. And then you get to a point where you might be actually doing other things, but there's this pull inside you to actually want to go back and just do that run because you haven't done it today, or to do that meditation in my case, or what have you. And that's when you start realizing that actually speaking, there are certain practices in life which give us both immediate joy and make us feel true to us, immediate kind of pulls. And also they actually prepare us to be that much stronger and fitter and happier in the future.
I had a very similar journey with meditation, and it's even come and gone after I developed the practice. Like, I made it a huge priority during my pregnancy, made sure to meditate 20 minutes twice a day, every single day. I don't think I missed one day.
Oh, wow.
And then I had an infant. And so I was like, I'm going to keep this going. It's my favorite time of the day. But of course I didn't for a while. But then I realized, like, all of these other areas in my life were getting kind of convoluted. It's like I felt those addictive tendencies pulling me even further. I felt myself getting more emotionally wrapped up in things that didn't involve me. Like all the things that I've been trying to untangle myself from over the years. And suddenly I'm just like falling into them. And so a while ago, I was like, I need to make sure that I'm prioritizing meditation. And I can't quite get the 20 minutes twice a day right now, but I'm getting 20 minutes and 10, which is very close. And within a few days, I could already feel myself just having a greater sense of peace when something would happen, because you sit there and you get used to having a thought that might be triggering and letting it pass by. And so it's so much easier to take in a conversation where I'm then triggered, and instead of snapping back, I'm just observing my thoughts about it and letting it pass by. And that practice of meditation helps me remember what those deeper levels of why I'm showing up are. And so I can get burnt out, for example, and then it like feels like every task is this thing I have to show up for. But once I started meditating, it's like I have the time to remind myself, okay, yeah, I'm not going to sit at my computer to finish this episode. It's like, why am I finishing this episode? Oh, so I can put this out. Can I go a level deeper? I was reminded, I can't remember who taught this. I'll have to look it up, but going 7 layers deep into the why, okay, well, why do you want this thing you're going to buy? Oh, so that I can, maybe it's a course you're putting out. Why do you want to put out this course? So I can make more money. Why do you want to make more money? So that I can purchase things without stress. Why do you want to purchase things without stress? So I can do this. And then ultimately it gets down to so I can show my child that there's a better way to live and have freedom. And you end up getting to this deep thing. My husband's been doing it and reminding me of this. But I don't know if I would have been able to get there without the stillness to find those things and to find the core things that are driving me. And I know that you teach that there are 5 core energies that drive us. What are those energies?
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing. That's a powerful and beautiful commentary on your meditation journey. Yeah, so the 5 energies. Within each of us is a very, very special place. And I call it your inner core, and you can sense it. You know when you're there, and when you feel just deeply connected and committed and curious and calm and centered. And so what I've sought to do is unpack that a little bit and have us all get a more structured guidance and understanding of what lies within. What is it that we, in an invisible but very tangible way, activate from there? What energies do we activate from there from time to time? And those are those 5 energies. Well, the first of those is what I call purpose. And purpose is about having kind of like what you were just saying with those, deeper dive why questions, why am I doing what I'm doing? What is my core intention here? What am I seeking in life? Answering some of those bigger why questions, setting yourself a certain pole star that will guide and direct you and inspire you to know that there is meaning, there is a sense of clarity and direction that you are actually committing to in life. Now, it may not come immediately, but it's something that we should all be exploring and evolving and experimenting to get us to that deeper why. And so that's purpose. Once we have that, the beautiful thing about it is that it makes you really resilient and adaptive, because from the outside, things are going to keep changing. You'll have a baby one day, and then another day you're now back to seeking to want to get back into the work mode as well, etc. So the outer conditions in life keep changing, but that inner steadiness of purpose, can be a very centering and anchoring thing. And so we keep re-expressing that purpose and reinterpreting it in fresh ways based on conditions that change around us, some of which we control, some of which don't control. But that inner clarity and commitment to what that purpose is, expressed in different ways on different days, becomes a very steadying device. So that's the first. The second energy is wisdom. And wisdom is about recognizing that, I may have the greatest of purpose, but if I get really, riled up or very scared or depressed or overconfident or hubristic, the best of intentions can just get, sidelined. And so wisdom is about striving to create an inner environment, just like you were talking about doing with your thoughts, where your thoughts and your emotions, beliefs are all in service of your higher purpose. And you are checking in on them and you are seeking to regulate them and direct them to be in that service. And so being able to strive to see the truth in all situations and all matters, even when it comes in uncomfortable and unexpected ways, like someone just reacts in sort of like a strange way to what you just said. And rather than ignore that, maybe you lean into it and you say, so I noticed that you just like pull back, or you just seem to have a grim expression when I announced that this is our work from home, policy now and what have you. And maybe actually there is something really important in that person's reaction that you will discover if you open yourself up to receiving the truth in that situation. So that's the wisdom energy. And then the third is, I call it growth. And that's about recognizing that, we all drift in and out of enlightenment. There's moments where we get closer to our core and moments where we get pulled away. And then moments where we are like really pulled away, very triggered or riled up and what have you. And so growth is about recognizing that there is that capacity in each of us to get it to grow closer and closer and closer towards that core in every moment, everything we do. And so when we are becoming more committed to reflecting and learning and getting advice and mentoring and practicing, building new habits, in order to get to activate those qualities of the core from within us in everything we do, then we are activating that energy of growth. The fourth of these is what I call love, and love is recognizing that, there's no such thing as a self-made, human being, man or woman. We're all interconnected and interdependent, not just with our own peers, but even past generations. Certainly, the parents who conceived and ultimately kind of nurtured us, our caregivers, past generations who have created the conditions of somewhat greater safety and comfort in the world, so that we can benefit from it today. And so, love is, as Rumi, this beautiful Sufi poet once said. He said, "Love is the bridge between you and everything." It's this recognition that we can take joy in other people's joy. We can find success in other people's success. That happens when, like you've just been blessed with, when you have a baby, their joy becomes your joy. Their success in some ways, small success. They've just started to, crawl. They've just started to walk. It's so joyous, a moment in our lives. But then maybe nature, through that experience of having a child or raising a family, was merely trying to open the human condition up to the realization that, oh my God, I can actually operate beyond me. There's, my heart is throbbing in that heart too, not just in my body. And if that's true of my family, maybe it's true of my global family as well. Maybe it's true of like every human being, that I'm meant to, in some ways, feel a sense of warmth, compassion, connection, kindness with them. So that's the love energy. And then the fifth and final one is what I call self-realization. And that's the idea that beyond our senses and beyond like our thoughts and our feelings, which is kind of the space most of the times we are operating in, either in the sensory or the thought and feeling. Actually, there's a part of us that lies at the very center of our being that we might call the human spirit, and it's a space of pure consciousness. You talk about how in some of the meditation practices that you recaptured, at some point after, giving birth, that you were feeling and sensing that sense of peace from within. And it's a birthright. It's something that all of us have within, to access. And so self-realization is about recognizing that there are practices and paths we can take to actually activating that truest, most centered part of us, and seeing the immense rewards that it gives you in how to then show up in life with that much greater clarity and centeredness. So yeah, purpose, wisdom, growth, love, and self-realization.
Those are all so powerful. And I feel like often I'm touching on one and kind of forgetting the other one, or like different ones highlight at different times in my life. Maybe that's just normal. But one thing I like about the way you teach is that you teach leadership, but a lot of times people think about leadership and they automatically think of a work setting or a corporate environment. But you talk about how life is leadership. And with all these qualities, not only do we live better, we also lead better. How do you view leadership? And in a way that might not be how other people at home think of leadership more in a work setting. do you view leadership, and in a way that might not be how other people at home think of leadership more in a work setting?
Yeah, thank you for asking. It's a very important part of the journey I've been on. In some ways, the thing that I've been striving for is a sense of unity and integration in all our moments, and to not feel that any one of them is better or more significant than any other as such. And one way that I, as a thought experiment, thought about it just the other day. I was saying is, as a person, as a human being, right? Let's say if I look down on two ants that are having some kind of debate, on the floor. One of them is like twice the height, or twice like the weight or something, and can beat the other ant up or whatever it might be, right? Twice the genius of the other ant, right? Like for them, it's such a significant thing, those relative differences. But like watching it from my scale and my level, it seems such a trite and trivial difference. Einstein said it beautifully once. He said, the difference between what the least knowledgeable person knows and what the most knowledgeable person knows is trivial compared to what is not known. And so I've always found these great ones, the inspired kind of creators and path makers and change makers from history, that they were less concerned about trying to like compare and contrast like where they were relative to where other people were. And they were more concerned merely about like, the unfathomable, largest kind of universal truths and ideas and aspirations that lay seemingly beyond humanity's reach. But then you look at it 60, 70, 100 years later, it came to within humanity's reach, and that's how humanity has advanced. Now, the reason I share that is because let's go back to the conversation you just started for us around life and leadership. Well, we have created a society where certain moments and roles are given more of a prime importance and more of a gravitas. And so if somebody's in the limelight, somebody's on stage, somebody's leading 100,000 people versus like 10,000 people versus 1,000 people, well, they're considered to be more successful. They're considered to be in some ways, quote unquote, superior, right? Now, what that does is it also makes us then conclude that if someone is dialing down, let's say, on some of those ambitions and putting more time into, for a period of time, let's say, raising the family or, caring for a loved one like a parent who's sick for a while, that somehow that those are less significant, less worthy of celebration and admiration, applause and respect and greatness, and less of an arena where like the greatest, most like creative, part of us can actually flourish relative to being the leader of 100,000 person or 1,000,000 person organization or what have you, right? But why? Because like in the eyes of the infinite, every finite act must be like looking very trite, looking very simple. Just like for me, when I look at two ants doing whatever they're doing, who cares about rank ordering them and all of that, right? But so in the eyes of the infinite, so if we take this more like transcendental perspective of looking at it from the eyes of the universe, then there's no reason why any human act is any less significant than any other. And if that's the case, then the same laws of conduct, the same laws of success should apply to every act. Why should it differentiate between one role and another role? That's what we have done in society today, but it doesn't need to be that way, right? And so if you see yourself just as this spirit, this fluid energy that is just kind of flowing, through moments of time and through space, getting to focus on one goal and then another and then a third, interacting with other fluid spirits who are moving around you, then perhaps all of life, just becomes this one kind of just constant quest to lead, to bring out the best. That is my definition of leadership, to activate the core in yourself and in others, to make like beautiful things happen, whether it's a fleeting conversation with a stranger or a serviceful act to a loved one or a strategic decision and move that you have to make at the top of like, a large institution. It's all the same. How can I bring out the best in me? How can I bring out the best in the people around me? Because I have this abiding and like, undying belief that we can go on a hero's journey, that we can do beautiful things together, that there's magic in this moment, even if we're feeling a little bit beaten up by circumstances and change and, conditions. And life is short. Why not take every moment as an invitation from life to like my son, my daughter, as the universe might call upon us, lead, do your part and then invite others and inspire them to do theirs.
Yeah, it reminds me of just the idea that the way you behave more than the way you say what you tell people to do that's what brings that out in other people. I was actually just talking to somebody about how amazing it is sometimes when you have relationships and you get into these patterns with relationships and you start to make assumptions about what the other person is thinking or feeling or whatever. And you're like in an argument and you see this person acting in such a way and you're like, well, it's clearly their fault. Like, obviously they're the one that's coming at me this way. And it might be even from an outside perspective, but often even just the ideas that we're holding or the way we're showing up in that activates that person's like anger or hostility or whatever without us even knowing it. So then it's easy for us to be like, well, you just came at me this way. And it's like, well, they felt this from you. And so often too, it's like, or lately in my life, I've had a lot of different family members come to me. One person in particular, much older than me, came and just said, like, I need to know what you're doing. Like, you seem like you've changed your life around so much. You just seem so happy. Like, how can I be happy with my life? And it brings tears to my eyes because I love this person very much. But there was years in the beginning of my self-exploration journey that I was like showing up to Christmas and being like, I learned this, and this is how you have to be, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I was like on the baby part of the journey. And then I realized like that didn't get anywhere. I could say whatever, but people were just like, okay, Melissa, this is the next train you're on, like whatever. But then over the years, like just seeing maybe my demeanor or the way that I interact with people or accept people or whatever, that shined through. So that moment meant probably so much more to me than that person realized, because yes, of course I wanted to show up and help that person, but at the same time, to me, it showed that other people can see the differences in my life. Other people maybe their awakening is even being activated because I first did the work. So it's not even just about me and finding this inner peace for myself. It's like people see that and then people want that. And that's what activates the desire for change, or maybe it's the understanding that there's hope to change in other people.
That's so beautiful. What a wonderful story. And thank you for sharing the prologue to that too, in terms of how you used to be and then, what happened in this moment. I mean, when Gandhi said something like, be the change you want to see in the world, I mean, that's kind of what he meant, that we don't realize that, when there is violence in the world, when there is, various kinds of, struggles on the outside, that they're basically a reflection of those same struggles and violence on the inside. I used to think of violence in very physical terms, for a while. And then I realized there's also, of course, emotional pain that you can cause somebody. But then I was reading some of Gandhi's writings and I realized, like, for him, violence began in the mind. It began with the construct of thought, with any context where you unnecessarily in your mind are critical of somebody else, or are just like feeling a sense of disrespect towards them because of some quality they have. I mean, there are some situations where it's reasonable and necessary. Like if I'm giving, a performance review to somebody, at work, and I have to kind of look at some of their, development gaps and help support them, guide them on how to close them. I kind of have to be in an objective and balanced and non-emotional way, kind of in a position to be critical. But when you take those situations out and you just examine your mind, I mean, it's remarkable for some of us, maybe not all, certainly I can speak for myself, where you start to realize, like, my heavens, if that's Gandhi's definition of violence, I have a lot of work to do, to really tame that impulse to judge people and to quickly rush to a certain conclusion about them in my mind. I mean, I may not speak around the outside. And so when we are seeking to create, let's say, a more peaceful world, a more peaceful society, what if each of us took that kind of goal that you mentioned you've discovered has really worked for you, which is, I want to change all these people in the world. What can I do to become the most non-violent version of myself from within? And then maybe there's something in the energy that I will exude that will naturally lead to a ripple impact, across others as well. Anyway, that's just one example, right? One example. It's been weighing on me with everything that's been happening, recently in our, fairly strained fabric, of American society with some of these mass shootings. So,
oh yeah, I haven't even allowed myself to go to some of the news cycles just because being a new mom, like anything involving children, like I can barely get the sentence out without just feeling like the weight. And so I haven't really touched on it, but I'm interested in what you said about speech being violence. And it's interesting that or ideas, thoughts even being violence, because it was only I think it was 4 days ago that I actually just meditated on this idea. And it's because I remember learning about, I think it's ahimsa in yoga teacher training, that is the nonviolent way of life. Yeah. And, so often we think of violence as being physical, but we also hear now it's a talking point. Some people call it a woke talking point about speech being violence. And there's a part of me that pushes back on that, where I'm like, no, and I think the part of me that pushes back is like, I just see more maybe structures or like governance around speech then. And I'm like, I don't know if that's necessarily the way to go, because I feel like we have to find that out for ourselves. We have to practice self-regulation. And then also if it's coming at us, processing that and turning it into something meaningful. And I think a lot of times those challenges are what drives us to make a big change. So I think that should be a self-regulation more than a government regulation. But in my meditation, I kind of unraveled, like, why do I feel such pushback against that? Because I know in my soul, I do believe that. I think some of the things that have hurt me most are not the physical things. It's what people have said. But like I said, those have also led to sort of unraveling deeper truths or finding life lessons. And it eventually has led to some of my greatest strengths. But when we're practicing that self-regulation, whether it's because somebody is verbally hurting us or we are accidentally verbally hurting somebody else or even purposefully, a lot of that comes back to emotional mastery. And I know that's in your section on living with wisdom. What are your steps to really mastering our emotions?
Yeah. Thank you for asking. Like you said, it's one of the most tangible and primary kind of areas to take on to help grow and develop yourself. I say tangible because the gains there are so immediate and so really clear, and it's just very, in some ways, exhilarating when you actually start to realize that there is so much more, to your potential when you're able to start taking ownership and stewardship, over your emotional life. So for me, I want to acknowledge the tremendous kind of insight and growth I've gained from studying the work and learning from and being mentored by, Dr. David Burns, who is a preeminent, cognitive behavior therapist, written a bestseller, Feeling Good, and several books beyond as well. Very, very, loved in the psychotherapy community for all the pioneering work he's done in this area. So I express my gratitude for him and what he's done to help me think about this. But the way I like to think about it is that, first off, do a little bit of an emotional audit. In other words, kind of look at which emotions are working for you and which ones are working against you. And typically you'll find it's not just simply like positive emotions are working for us and negative are working against us, because an emotion like anger, most people consider it negative. But if you're doing the right things with it, it can actually be really helpful from time to time to experience that emotion and use it to alert you to an injustice or to a certain cause or something that needs to be, given attention to. And it can give you courage and clarity to go ahead and do that. So, on the other side, a positive emotion like optimism, most people consider that to be a good thing to have. True. And at the same time, at times it can lead to overconfidence and a complacency and a lack of preparedness in certain situations. And so just do an emotional audit and understand where your emotional life is helping or hurting you, right? And then once you identify that there are certain emotions I want to work on, well, then the good news is that today there is such a profusion of insights and tools available to us, many different pathways that we can take to get emotional mastery. The first step typically always is to gain a certain amount of emotional awareness, which means that moment by moment, you are seeking to have a part of you, doing the dance in the ballroom of life, but there's a part of you on the balcony that is being able to watch and just be able to kind of like map that, I seem to be surging with this emotion right now. And usually when I surge, I can't trust myself. I would score myself a high on a low, medium, high scale on this emotion of irritation right now, or on this emotion of impatience right now, or whatever it might be. So a part of you on the balcony, just being able to observe, therefore getting to a certain level of emotional awareness. All you have is an awareness in that moment. Typically that by itself can be a catalyst for saying, this is not the right time for me to send that email to this person. This is not the right time for me to make this decision, or what have you. Or I better get to regulate and, shift my emotional state because this person is walking in the door. The conversation might start any moment and I don't want to be in this irritated state when the conversation starts. So from emotional awareness, you want to get to some amount of emotional, if you want to call it regulation, right? You can intentionally direct your emotion to where you want it to go. If you think it's too intense, you want to find a way to dial it down. If you think it's an unnecessary wrong emotion or jumping to a certain conclusion or, a quick judgment that you don't really want, but it's a habit of the past and so it's surging within you, well, then you want to find a way just to dispense with it and to walk away from it. Sometimes these can be behaviors we can take on, like just hitting the pause button, just like pausing for a while, taking your mind off that issue to let your body just calm down and get yourself and it's amazing. Within 2 minutes, you can be a wholly different person. Sometimes it's about taking a walk or doing some exercise or listening to some uplifting, pleasant, beautiful music or just doing some deep breathing, or acting out the opposite emotion, fake it until you make it. All or any of these can be immediate behavioral things we can do to get our emotions a little bit sort of like out of that like sharp-edged, intense surge. But then I would offer that an even more lasting tool in the long run is where we start to correlate our thinking with our emotions, and we start to observe and realize that my emotions are coding in them certain messages, that I have unconsciously just internalized, that like this person is an idiot, for doing X, Y, or Z or what have you. Or like, clearly they're incompetent or like they're being so unfair to me or like, life just sucks right now. So we have all of these kinds of things unconsciously. I call them your ants, as your automatic negative thoughts that just like, just are scripts that are running in the back of our mind, underlying these emotions. And if we can become aware of these scripts and then start to, in a healthy way, thoughtful way, intentional way, re-script them, challenge them and re-script them, find the imbalance, the lack of logic, the lack of data, et cetera, in these thoughts, and realize how much they're, in a sense, like crippling us from within emotionally, and then start to move to a new pattern of thinking and put more energy into the new pattern and send more, if you want to call it like oxygen, through the bloodstreams of those neurons in our brain that are fired when this new thought is going through our brain rather than the old thought. I'm now translating it into like the physiology of it. But if we keep doing that, again and again and again, after a while, these new thoughts become the more natural part of who we are and how we react. And the old ones just start to fade away. And then we realize, oh my heavens, I no longer feel so triggered, in this situation or that situation, which, for the last couple of years, I was really working on. And that's a beautiful journey to take where you start to feel a new and improved version of yourself who has expanded, in a sense, your comfort zone, because now more of those blows and wild cards that life deals with us from time to time can be dealt with from a place of grace and thought.
It reminds me of what I was saying earlier about how I may hold an energy within me, or maybe it's an idea or an assumption about somebody or kind of how I've compartmentalized them. And then I'm interacting with them thinking they're the problem, but I'm the one who came in with all of these ideas within me. And I'm going to use the example of weather, because clearly the weather is not out to get me, right? But I've noticed, like, I've decided last year that I was going to stop thinking of any weather as bad. I did read a book called There's No Such Thing as Bad Weather that kind of gave me the jump start.
I love that.
And it's just, I started to try to just find a mindset shift, a new way to think about it. And I like to go through I call it my Rolodex of mindsets, and then land on whatever one feels good. And sometimes I'll have a tendency to go outside and be like, oh man, it's cloudy and rainy today. Like, why? And I started actually thinking like, oh my gosh, the weather is humid and cool. The universe must think my skin needs this. And I just like pretend that it's exactly for me instead of against me.
How beautiful.
And you can do that with anything. Like, I know that love or hate the book, The Secret, whatever, but the author Rhonda Byrne calls people your personal emotional trainers. And it's so easy to think like, oh, this person is doing this to me, or why does this person have to be so frustrating? And looking at it in a way of like, okay, I am experiencing this because my soul needs it, or my human needs it to refine in the way that my goals are. That is why every situation is in front of me, is because this is what I need. And if you look at it like, if you have to stick to the thing that life is happening to you, then it's like, yeah, it's happening because this is what I need, the for you aspect of that. And so without being able to kind of direct your mind in a way that feels more empowering, then we're subject to what you call these mental distortions that sort of, we think that we're just viewing everything objectively, but nothing is really objective. Everything is subjective.
Oh, beautiful. I'll share a story which I wasn't able to put in my book just for space constraints. And so I'm happy to get a chance, today to share
exclusive story from my love.
That's right.
I'm into it.
Because it speaks so much to this philosophy, which I love that you just recounted for us. I haven't applied it to weather the way you have so thoughtfully in framing it to actually feel a tangible blessing each time the weather changes to whatever it changes to. I love that. So there's one time I'm on an airplane and we were meant to fly to Los Angeles from New York, and we were on the tarmac, and it's just waiting. And so, it rolls, into higher gear. And then suddenly and it's like 11 o'clock at night now. And the, pilot announces, ladies and gentlemen, sorry, the flight crew has overstayed, the number of hours of work they can do in a day based on the federal regulations. And so at this point, with the delay that has happened, we will not be able to fly. And so please come back in the morning. We're going to reschedule you on a different airplane, and they'll take care of your hotel. And this was at JFK. It's like, an hour plus, from New York City. And it's Friday evening. So I've lost my Friday evening. I'm in this plane. I'm going to do what? Like come back for like 5 hours to sleep and then go back again. And anyway, I was just like, going through that kind of sense of feeling of disappointment and just annoyance. And then the person next to me, immediately when he announces that, she just like shrugs the shoulders and looks at me and smiles and says, everything happens for a reason. And I was like, wow, how graceful, how thoughtful, because that's the philosophy I also ascribe to and believe in. In that moment, I was drifting out of enlightenment. So I get out of the airplane, I, do the math. I'm like, what's the point of commuting back and forth, New York City? Let's just try to get this hotel here that they're going to give us. But the line was so long of all the passengers. I was like, this is just not going to be worth it. So I do take a cab. I come into the city grudgingly for my, 5 hours of sleep. And I enter my apartment and, there's a weird smell, but it's okay. I just keep doing what I'm doing for a little bit. Then I want to warm something up. So I go to the gas oven, and my heavens, I'd left the gas on. That was the smell, Everything happens for a reason. Everything happens for a reason. I mean, of course, I keep wondering, what about the 237 other passengers? What is it that the universe had conspired for them to make it their moment as well for unexpectedly not flying to Los Angeles that day? But for me, it's very clear what that moment was for. It was the lady next to me who had to remind me of that even before she knew what was going to be. So I always use that story anytime I feel myself slipping into that, why this?
Oh my gosh, I fully have chills. I would get back on that plane the next day and be like, sorry guys, I left my gas on. That's the whole reason this happened. I'm really... Well,
so true.
The last thing I want to touch on is that you talk about these 3 states: triggered, everyday, and centered. And in the stories that we've told, we've kind of shown how we oscillate between that. But how do we move to get more of that centered, more of the triggered to kind of go into the everyday, and more of the everyday to kind of go into our centered, so that we're living more in that highest self or from our core energies?
Beautiful. I mean, I think just a very simple, but, a very helpful way to think about yourself, that you're not one self. We talked about that in the beginning as well, right? And there's the agitated, triggered self from time to time. There's the everyday, and then there's, the very centered part of you that you're most proud of, right? And so I would say, 2 things. One is, do make sure that you keep going on your journey towards more and more centeredness, because you have no idea what is awaiting you there fully. And you may feel like you're there. You may feel like, the peace you feel when you take that walk in nature or something is like the ultimate thing. But actually, from all the teachings that I've explored over the years and the little bit of glimpses I've had of, the path that I'm on, I can tell you that there is like boundless joy and love and stability and peace and fulfillment and richness at the very core of our being. And so that journey is never over. And it's powerful to keep investing some time in your day to put things on pause and have some practice, that takes you there as best, that practice can help you. Now, what happens is when you start to do that, then over time, your brain is getting rewired. And so there's this book called Altered Traits, written by a couple of the preeminent, researchers on the new science of meditation. New science as in it's an old and timeless, technology, but science is now starting to apply itself to studying it, right? The practice of meditation. And so Dr. Richie Davidson and Daniel Goleman, they've written this book, Altered Traits, and they talk about it there. They talk about how you can see that over time, when you keeping on doing your centering practice, you start to have more stability in your everyday moments. You don't get as disgruntled or distracted or dejected or what have you. And so it naturally starts to infuse itself more in your everyday moments. You just become a more present person in your everyday moments. One thing I found very helpful is that in my everyday moments, if I have a little bit of me that is staying in an observational state, then from time to time, it might tell me, Hitendra, you're getting a little bit frazzled. You're getting a little bit sort of just like jaded and just like not fully inspired. It's a good moment to pause and go within. And then I might just, pause my activity if I can, if I'm not in the middle of a meeting or conversation with somebody, and just take 5 minutes to just go within and do whatever my practice might be, whether it's deep breathing or meditation or a chant or a visualization or a mantra or whatever it is. Just take 5 minutes to just go in, or 3 minutes or 2 minutes, and just go in there, just do that. And that way you are getting at least a glimpse, a little bit of reconnection with that centered self. And then you're re-emerging back into the arena of life to play the game, that the world is inviting you to play, but from a place of authentic connection to your core within. So I have found the practice of creating that awareness, and now and then during the day, going and drinking again from that limitless fountain, that lies within us. Small little interventions, and then having a more steadier practice at some other point in the day to be a very transformational thing. And then we are left with our trigger states. Now, in the trigger states, the main thing is for us to take ownership that this is not the world that is causing this. We cause this to ourselves. That itself is such a huge leap. You've talked about it as something so important to realize that it is me, it is you. It's not life beyond. So take that. If you can take that leap, that itself is like a beautiful, kind of progression towards taking full ownership over your state of being. But then if you can take that leap, say it's my responsibility, then some of the tools we were talking about when we were discussing emotional mastery come into play. And initially, they may not give you like perfect rewards. It might be that, you can recover from an emotional like trigger sooner than before, but you still have these with high frequency. But it can also be that over time you discover that the intensity starts to go down. And then third and finally, you get to a point where you start to detect the surge coming and you're able to redirect it in the flow of the moment without even allowing it to go to a surged place. And that's a beautiful level of mastery to get to. And it might take, years or a lifetime to even get there. But why not? I mean, that makes life so, such a beautiful journey to keep going on.
Right. And even if it does take a lifetime to get there, I've found that one of the things that gets me into that centered state most often is just knowing that I'm constantly making progress. And so that's when I tend to feel like less hopeful or less like more chaotic or just despondent, is when I don't feel like I'm making progress. I don't have something to focus on that is just at least a little bit of a challenge for me every single day. And what a great challenge to give ourselves then, one to just find that place of peace no matter what's going on around us. So thank you so much for all of the ideas that you've brought to us in this episode. For listeners that are interested in learning more about you and your book, where is the best place for them to connect?
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. You've been a wonderful companion and, conversational partner and drawing things out both of me and of you. I've just loved your personal journey and your stories. The best place I would invite us to consider is just my personal website. So that's hitendra.com, HITENDRA, hitendra.com. And you'll see information about my book and newsletter and a few other things. And certainly very, very grateful to have been here with you and your audience. And I wish all of you who are listening today real well on your pursuit, both of outer and inner success.
All the links for this episode will be at mindlove.com/X85. Your challenge for this week is to find one place in your life that you can nudge yourself a little closer to the center. I'm always on this journey, this particular challenge. I was recently talking to someone who said, there's just so much to do. There's so much to fix in my life. And I thought, I know exactly what you mean. If you would have shown me a picture or a short video clip of my life now compared to when I first started realizing that something needed to change, wow, my world is vastly different. I don't even know if that version of me would have looked at this version of me and thought, I want that life. And I mean that in the most amazing, miraculous way possible. As I've gotten closer to the center of who I am, to the core of my being, I've realized so many of the things I was chasing back then don't matter to me at all. The things that I thought were important back then aren't important to me at all. But I didn't figure this out all at once. I figured it out one small baby step at a time. I just started following my joy a little bit more often. And that doesn't mean that the moment I made that decision, everything was different. It means that I found one area that seemed manageable or doable, and I made baby steps towards that. And when I got the hang of that one, I found another thing to work on, and another thing. And there's still infinite amount of things that I can focus on. But looking back, all I can see is how far that I've really come. The trap is when we start to judge our progress or focus on the gap of where we are and where we want to be. Focus on how we're not there yet, or who has what we don't, or how we're always messing up this one area. The best way to approach any of these feelings is with compassion, like the loving mother reparenting yourself. Understanding that the journey is never linear, that there's never really a destination that you land at, that there will always be new challenges, that there will always be things that you can find that you can do better, and really just trusting the process. So let me know what you're working on this week. Reach out to me on Instagram at mindlovemelissa, or leave a comment right on the show notes page at mindlove.com/x85. If you'd love to support Mind Love, the best way to do that is by joining Mind Love Premium at mindlove.com/premium. You can also do it right in the Apple Podcasts app. You can also leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you do, I just might read your review on the show. And finally, supporting any of my amazing sponsors. I say no to a lot of sponsors because I want to find brands and companies that I'm in perfect alignment with. So any of the sponsors on this show, I have fully vetted and absolutely love. And that's all for today. So thanks for giving your mind a little love today, and I'll see you next week.